can still use us even though we're not perfect, right? And he was able to, I believe that this is a really good example of that, kind of that one passionate love that you should hold for a person, right? And it's like, it's only them, you know? And I think it's so sad, right, when you see like relationships where it's not exclusive, right? Where, you know, people are not being faithful to one another. It just breaks.
I feel sorry for them. Because I know, I actually think he actually found true love maybe in the middle of all his marriages, and this person was his true love, but he had all these other women, and divorce wasn't an option then. You know what I mean? So I feel sorry for him there, because he had somebody that he...
Yeah. But you know, you can read this not as Solomon's life. You can read it just as like a love between a man and a woman, you know? Because one of the things like they teach us in poetry is like, it's really hard sometimes if you know the poet's life to take the poet and put them into the poem, okay? And they teach us in poetry that you shouldn't do that, right? Because poetry is a form of art. And I'm not trying to say the Bible is like artistic, but I am saying like to an extent, once the art is formed, it's no longer a part of the artist in that sense. So I don't know, I just kind of like, you can look at it different ways, but I like your perspective. You're kind of thinking, okay, like, how did Solomon come to this?
God says to him, if you waited, to me, if you waited, this true love that you've got would have been so beautiful.
Yeah.
To me,
didn't
that's
have to go find all these other people. Yeah.
If you waited, you would have had a beautiful true love. Because that's to me is beautiful true love. But
maybe. Any other comments?
It's just a wee funny one actually. You know how you said a wee while ago that you were talking about timing?
Yeah.
And it was like, it's a matter of two people being in the same bus at the same time. I actually met my husband on
Yes, see?
So,
there you go. On the same bus at the
so
same
we've
time.
been together 25 years and we've been married for 18 years, so you've just confirmed my whole marriage.
Yes, that was my goal.
Laughing.
No, that's awesome.
well, mine was like Solomon and us standing and everything.
Yeah, but you know how we can we can read this from different perspectives, right? And I don't know, I just find that it's beautiful, but I can see how probably Solomon had a lot of brokenness in his life, and that he could still come to the understanding. And really that's where we have to be at, is even though we've all been broken, I'm sure, even in marriage, you know, you get broken, you get hurt. Even if your marriage is still, I'm sure there's been times where it's not been easy, like, you know, but even in that brokenness, we have to somehow make sure that we don't take that brokenness and we put it on God and say, this is how you were going to treat me. He is trying to show us that his love for us is like, it is unfailing, unconditional, and it's exclusive. Even though God loves all of us, his relationship with you is exclusive to you. The Bible says that he's like jealous, okay? He doesn't want any other kind of overwhelming passion to be in your life except for him. And I think that the Song of Solomon is such a great, like, it showcases that. Even though it's talking a lot about the body, right? We know that it's talking about, like, sex and those sort of things. It's still something that God has, like, shows as part of, like, a beautiful part of a relationship, okay? And it's something that consumes all of us. So, I think I'm going to kind of sweep past the Jewish wedding tradition just because it's here. But it is really cool to see how the Jews prepare for a wedding, how the groom proposes, he prepares his bride, the bride waits, how the bridegroom comes, there's a bridal chamber. It's kind of like, it's different from the Western idea of marriage and weddings. And so it kind of, you know, it's good to look at it from that perspective. How the Jews approached marriage can give you a better understanding of this, you know, because some of the stuff they talk about, like the bridal chamber, they talk about the preparation of the bride. It was like it's a big deal and different in Jewish culture and tradition. So it's good to read Song of Solomon with that understanding. Does that make sense? Okay. It's not like in the West, you know, where we have like our head knights or, you know, it's not like that. It's completely different. And so I think that if we have a distorted view of marriage, not distorted, but we have a Western view of marriage, this is definitely an Oriental song. It is an Eastern song. It's not going to make sense altogether. And I mean, even the way that there are some of the descriptions in the book are like not how we would describe people, you know, like I'd be like, you have lovely eyes, but in the Orient you can say your neck is like an ivory tower, right? And it makes like, it's is a beautiful poem, okay? So I'm just saying, like, if you read this with like a Western mindset, you might miss some of the beauty of the passages, right? One part says that when the bride is describing the groom, she says, "You're like the strength, the cedars of Lebanon." Okay, so she's making saying that he is strong in body, like the cedars of Lebanon. Well, if you don't know what the cedars of Lebanon look like, it can be a little bit like, what do they even look like? They could be little bushes or something. But no, they're like these really strong, tall trees. Okay, so it's like it's an Oriental song. Okay, all right. Let's see how much more awkward things I can get to. Okay, so I want to turn to, if you go to these last few pages, it's a lot of writing, but I would encourage you, this is an article by, I have his name, Ray C. Stedman. This is an excellent article about the Book of Song of Solomon. It's the last few pages. I just kind of read through it and it kind of gave me a better understanding. So he talks a lot about the poetical books together. And I remember how I was talking about how there would be such a void if we didn't have the Song of Solomon. It's in the last of the 5 poetical books of the Old Testament. Job is the first, then Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the last is the Song of Solomon. Lamentations is included in the poetical books, even though it was written by the prophet Jeremiah talking about during his suffering. So in a sense, Lamentations is more of a prophecy, a book of prophecy, but we include it in the poetical books. The book of Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes, they form a trilogy which sets forth the voice of the soul.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, you don't have to read through it. I'm just going through some notes. So you can just,
Right.
yeah, sorry. I would recommend just reading this on your own time. It's a lot to read now, but if you're reading through the Book of Song of Solomon, I would recommend reading this before you read the book because it's a really good understanding of what it talks about. So Job is the voice of the Spirit, right? Job's whole relationship with God, the suffering that he went through, it tried his spirit, it tested his faith. And so it's a book that we can look to when our spirit is weak and we are trying to gain, faith and understanding. We turn to Job, right, when our spirit is failing. And then when our mind and our will and emotions are struggling, right, we turn to Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, those books that kind of deal with that parts of our soul and mind and emotion. Well, Song of Solomon is a book about our physical man and where we can turn to when there's those certain desires and things, So I'm not saying this book is pornographic in any way. I'm just saying that that's what it's supposed to be. And so, but the book of Ecclesiastes is the voice or expression of the mind of man. The book of Proverbs is the expression of the will of man. The Song of Solomon is preeminently it's the book about the body. And I think that, like I mentioned earlier, if you try to interpret this book just as an interpretation of the church, which is what I usually like to use it for, just not to be uncomfortable. But if you do that, you really miss out on the essential, what this book is really about. It is about sex. It is about that relationship in marriage, okay? And so as soon as you try to be oh, no, it's not about that, you're kind of taking away from something that God is showing you as something that is part of his will in marriage. And so it's better to just read it the way it's supposed to be rather than try to I've done it before, but try to remember that is what it's about. But it's not supposed to be a book for young boys to make fun of and use as different, because that's usually how it's used. So anyway, the play is set in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, and it's a chorus for singers referred to as the Daughters of Jerusalem, and it asks certain leading questions from time to time during the account of the events leading up to the courtship, betrothal, and marriage. And the language of the book is highly poetical and figurative, and there may also be some difficulty determining who is speaking at any one time. But you can distinguish the different speakers in this way. The bridegroom always refers to her as my love, and the bride calls him my beloved. So whenever you hear in Song of Solomon when it says my beloved, that's the Shulamite woman referring to the man, okay? Whenever he says my love, it's him referring to her. So that's a good note to make when you're reading it. My beloved is referring to him, and my love is referring to her. And it is a book, it is a language of love, right? It's really, I mean, when you read the book, I don't know, it's very beautiful, it's very poetic, right? It's not anything to be ashamed of reading it. And in fact, it's something that, you know, should be part of something that we read, you know? If you've never read it, you should. I talked about the timing, I talked about, yeah, and so we're seeing the results. I was talking about the timing, but God has ordained all of these delights, these pleasures, as part of the experience of men and women, but only in the relationship what makes it possible, which is marriage. So that's why this whole book is like a preparation for marriage. And so when you try to take that fundamental aspect out of it, it falls apart, right? It really doesn't turn into something beautiful anymore. It turns into something that can really damage the soul and the heart. And that's when it becomes really important, like especially in the world we're living in, to try to communicate to young men and young women that getting involved in a physical relationship before marriage can be really damaging, not just to, you know, maybe their reputation or their future, but it can be damaging to their emotions, you know, and their heart. And that's why we have to be sensitive to young people or to people that have maybe grown up under that mindset. They don't know the difference. They don't understand the concept of marriage. We have to remind them that in this beautiful, concept of marriage that God has created, it can, the physical, it can become so beautiful. And so a lot of people come in and they don't understand this. They don't understand like the beautiful part of the relationship between a man and woman. They only think of the damage that it's done to them. They only think of how, most not pleasurable. It's just awful, right? Because it's not done the way that God intended it to. So we have to be sensitive to that, because most people that come into church have no understanding of this at all. No understanding. And so we have to, be sensitive to that, that it's not a normal thing anymore. It's completely twisted in the world we live in. I don't know, the more I'm working with young people and the more I'm the more I'm just like so surprised how differently people were raised, Young people being encouraged to just like date however they want at a young age. I was like, you're kidding me. They said, oh, my parents, they never even they thought it was normal. I'm like, oh my goodness, you're joking, right? And they come into church so bruised and battered and sexually abused. They don't understand it. So we have such a Song of Solomon is really a good resource for us if we want to start teaching people the truth about it. That really the enemy of our souls has used this as a tool to hurt us when God gave it as a gift to us. So he wasn't, but we have to remember in the Song of Solomon, he wasn't singing just a purely human love song. He was trying to also communicate that this relationship was something God gave to men and women to give them a better understanding of the beauty of their relationship with God. I know some people, but that's weird. No, it's like, but really, he's the one who created it. He has a purpose for it. So it's not something we have to be like afraid to talk about. It's okay. And we have to remember that Song of Solomon isn't just like a physical book, right? It's not just about like purely physical relations. It's also about like the whole essence of love between a man and woman. And we know that it includes like our emotion and our spirit as well. So someone has well said, if you love Jesus Christ, you will love this Song of Solomon, because here are the words that fully express the rapture of the heart that has fallen in love with Christ. When you read the book of Ecclesiastes, you read of man's search throughout the world for something to satisfy his heart. And the message of that book is simply that if a man gains the world, it isn't enough. His heart is still empty because the heart is greater than its object. But the message of the Song of Solomon is that Christ is so tremendous, so mighty, so magnificent that the heart has fallen in love with him will never be able to fully plumb the depths of his love and his concern and his care. The object, Christ, is greater than the heart. I love the passage in 8, verse 7 that says, many waters cannot quench love, and there can the floods drown. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, it would utterly be contemned. He was basically saying that no amount of money can buy this concept, this love. that God has for us. It can't be bought. And no matter how many waters come against you, right? So essentially, anything that tries to steal your love or tries to buy your love, it's impossible to quench something as powerful as love, and the love that Christ has for us, and the love that we ultimately have for someone else, right? Truthfully, I say this in all truthfulness, I believe it is possible to love people in a way where it's never quenched. I think that there are certain loves that just aren't quenched. I don't know about, talking about like a relationship, but even if I think about the relationship I have with maybe like part of my family, no matter what ever happened or what they did to me, I don't know if anything could really quench the love that I have for them. And you probably feel that way about your kids, right? No matter what they do, right? Even if they just do the worst things, right? Nothing is really going to quench that love. And I believe it's the same, it can happen between a man and woman. I believe that there are people who have lived this life with a love that never quenched. And so I think that the Bible says that, what is it, faith, love, faith, hope, and love, they will remain, but the greatest of these is love, right? So we know that it's something that's unfailing, and it has that potential. I also wanted to, I guess I'm kind of tacking this on at the end. I could have put it somewhere else, but if you go to chapter 2, verse 15, it says, "Take us the little foxes that spoil the vine, for our vines have tender grapes." It's talking about, this idea of love, right? It's not usually the big things that break love, right? It's usually those little things, right? Those little foxes that spoil the vine. It's not taking time to take care of the little things that lead to big things. And I think that the Song of Solomon has a good rendering of this idea. There is a springtime of life, but it doesn't lie in the past, it lies in the future. So I know that maybe if you've already feel like you've kind of experienced Song of Solomon, it's not something to be a song about the past of our younger days. Just because the man and woman in this are young doesn't mean that it's only for the young. It's talking about how this book is about the future. It's a hope. This whole book is about the hope of them meeting one another like the bride and bridegroom. And that kind of hope is how we live our Christian walk, right? There's a hope to be with the bridegroom. And the Lord Jesus Christ, returning at last to claim his waiting bride, will greet her in words very much like a Song of Solomon, one of unconditional love. The springtime will come, the time of singing, the time when earth shall blossom again, and the curse will be lifted, and the flowers will appear on the earth. This is a picture of what can take place in the heart of one who falls in love with Jesus and enters into springtime. The cold winter of loneliness, misery, and selfishness is past, and the time of singing has come. I think the last thing I'd probably say about the Song of Solomon, I know I went on and on about how we have to read this book literally, which we do, but it's kind of like when I look around at the world we live in, there's so many aspects to the creation, including ourselves, including the mountains, that give us a greater revelation of who God is. And I think that in the Song of Solomon, he's talking about one of the most intimate things that he's created, right? That love between a man and woman, both physically and emotionally. And I think we can see things in the physical that give us a better understanding of God and the spiritual, truly. And so, I remember I was studying the heart, I was studying about the human heart. And in my study of the human heart, I was like, oh my goodness, I started getting this understanding of God that was just blowing my mind, how he created my heart and how he used it for his glory. I think that that's the same with the Song of Solomon. You can read this book literally, but you can also read it in a way that gives you a better understanding of our God. It gives you a better understanding of who he is, right? That this is something he's created, and it's supposed to give us a better insight into who he is. So that is all I have. Is there any questions? No? Any questions? Thank you guys so much for listening to me, even when I was having to teach a subject that I'm not always comfortable with, but you're a great class, and you're so easy to teach, so. If you do have any questions, feel free to ask me, or Sister Kelly, or Pastor Kelly, or anyone else you think that might have great answers. Okay, well you can
enjoyed it. I really did
Oh,
enjoy
good.
it.
You can, you're welcome to go on your break. But anyway, I would just encourage you to read the book, you know? Maybe read it every once in a while when it's good for you.
Sister Cori,
Yes.
welcome back.
Sorry?
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I miss you, Maria. Are you doing well?
I am. I'm getting there.
Good, good.